The autumn rain drummed against the chapel windows as Captain Marcus Steele stood at rigid attention. The flag-draped coffin before him held the remains of Colonel William Mackenzie, the man who had forged him into the weapon he became. At 72, Marcus carried his years with the same discipline Mackenzie had drilled into him decades ago. His weathered hands gripped his dress uniform cap as the honor guard fired their final salute. The brass casings hitting the concrete echoed like distant gunfire, and suddenly Marcus was no longer in Arlington Cemetery. He was 37 years younger, crouched in the Hindu Kush Mountains, with death stalking every shadow. Afghanistan, October 1987. The wind howled through the rocky peaks as Captain Marcus Steele, then 35, adjusted his night vision goggles. Behind him, three of America's finest operators moved like ghosts through the darkness. Jake "Bulldog" Rodriguez carried enough firepower to level a small village. Tom "Doc" Williams clutched his medical kit with one hand, his rifle with the other. Rick "Hawk" Johnson's sniper rifle gleamed in the moonlight. "Ghost, this is Iron Base." Colonel Mackenzie's voice crackled through the radio with the authority of a man who had survived Korea and Vietnam. "Target is confirmed at grid reference 347895. Derek Harrison is no longer considered an asset. He's a clear and present danger to national security." Marcus pressed the radio to his ear. The static couldn't hide the pain in his mentor's voice. Derek Harrison, CIA operative, Senate committee darling, and once Mackenzie's protege, had stolen classified nuclear facility security protocols. Intelligence suggested he was preparing to auction them to Soviet contacts, potentially enabling attacks on American nuclear installations. "Copy, Iron Base. We have eyes on the facility." Through his binoculars, Marcus studied the concrete bunker carved into the mountainside. Soviet weapons caches lined the perimeter, payment for Taliban protection. The intelligence Harrison carried could cripple America's nuclear defense capability within months. "Listen up," Marcus whispered to his team. "This isn't just another snatch and grab. The target knows our playbook. He was trained by the same man who trained us." Doc Williams shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, if he knows our tactics, then we adapt." Marcus's voice carried Mackenzie's steel. "Iron taught us more than tactics. He taught us honor. Harrison may know how we fight, but he's forgotten why we fight." As they began their descent toward the facility, Mackenzie's voice returned with additional intelligence that made Marcus's blood run cold. "Ghost, be advised. Harrison's stolen files contain Operation Red Dawn, Soviet plans for coordinated strikes against our nuclear facilities. If those plans reach Moscow, they'll know exactly how to cripple our strategic response capability." The implications hit Marcus like shrapnel. This wasn't just about one rogue agent. If Harrison succeeded in his sale, the Soviets would possess detailed intelligence about American nuclear vulnerabilities. The resulting strikes could kill millions and leave America defenseless. "Understood, Iron Base. Nuclear protocols are the priority." 40 meters from the entrance, Marcus held up his fist. The team froze. Something was wrong. The guard positions were too obvious, the approach too clear. Harrison was broadcasting his defensive setup like a training exercise. "Iron Base Ghost, we have a problem. Target appears to be expecting us." "Explain." "Defensive positions are textbook, like someone read our manual and set up the exact countermeasures we'd face in training." A long pause filled the radio. When Mackenzie spoke again, his voice carried the weight of terrible knowledge. "Proceed with mission, Ghost. Sometimes the hardest part of command is sending good men into situations where survival is uncertain." Marcus felt ice in his veins. Mackenzie knew something that required this mission to continue despite obvious danger. The old colonel had never sacrificed his men without purpose, but he had also never hidden critical intelligence from them. As they approached the bunker entrance, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap designed by someone who understood exactly how they thought, how they moved, how they would try to win. The metal door stood slightly ajar, another invitation that felt wrong. Marcus signaled for breach positions, but before they could move, a voice echoed from inside the bunker. "Captain Steele." Derek Harrison's voice carried clearly through the night air. "I've been waiting for you." The team raised their weapons, but Marcus held up a restraining hand. Harrison continued speaking, his words designed to carry to all of them. Did Iron tell you why you're really here? Did he explain what those nuclear facility files actually contain? Bulldog's finger tightened on his trigger, but Marcus remained calm. Why don't you enlighten us, Harrison? They're not stolen files, Captain. They're fabricated intelligence designed to feed false information to Soviet handlers. I didn't steal them. I was ordered to take them. The words hit Marcus like artillery fire. A sanctioned operation, disguised as betrayal. Harrison continued. Mackenzie knew you'd need to believe I was a traitor. The Soviets had to believe it too. But there's a problem with our charade. Real Soviet special forces are en route to this location. They want to recover the intelligence and eliminate the American agent who stole it. As if summoned by Harrison's words, the distinctive thump of helicopter rotors echoed across the valley. Soviet MiL Mi-8 helicopters, moving fast and low toward their position. Spetsnaz, Captain. 20 operators, led by Colonel Viktor Petrov. They'll be here in 10 minutes, and they have orders to leave no witnesses. Marcus processed the tactical situation with Mackenzie's training. A defensive position against superior numbers with limited ammunition and no easy extraction route. The kind of scenario Mackenzie had drilled into them in the worst conditions imaginable. Iron Base, Ghost, Sitrep has changed. Request immediate clarification on mission parameters. Mackenzie's voice came back steady and sure. Mission parameters remain unchanged, Ghost. The intelligence must reach Moscow through controlled channels. Harrison's cover must be maintained at all costs. The inclusion of Harrison's protection confirmed everything. This was Mackenzie's operation from the beginning, a complex deception that required his own student to believe in Harrison's betrayal. The old colonel had played the longest game of all, sacrificing his own reputation in the eyes of his protege to serve a larger purpose. Understood, Iron Base. Ghost Team consolidating defensive position. Marcus turned to Harrison, who had emerged from the bunker with his hands visible but not raised. The man looked older than his 45 years, worn down by months of deep cover work behind enemy lines. How long until they arrive? 8 minutes, maybe less. What's Petrov's objective? Harrison's expression darkened. Recover the nuclear intelligence and eliminate all American personnel. Moscow's orders are specific. No survivors. No witnesses. Marcus studied the terrain with eyes trained by decades of combat. The ridgeline above offered better positions, but getting there would expose them during movement. The weapon caches below contained firepower, but also represented choke points where superior numbers could overwhelm them. But something else nagged at Marcus. Something about the Soviet response time and positioning that suggested this encounter was more than coincidental. Doc, Hawk, establish overwatch positions on the ridge. Bulldog, inventory those weapon caches. Harrison, you're with me. As his team moved with practiced efficiency, Marcus keyed his radio one final time. Iron Base, Ghost, if this goes sideways, it won't, son. Mackenzie's voice carried absolute confidence. I've been preparing you for this moment since the day we met. Trust your training, trust your men. Remember what I taught you about impossible odds. Marcus smiled grimly, remembering Mackenzie's favorite lesson. When facing impossible odds, don't try to beat them. Change the game entirely. The Soviet helicopters were closer now, their engines growing louder against the mountain silence. Soon, Marcus would discover whether Mackenzie's 30 years of teaching had prepared him for the ultimate test, not just of tactical skill, but of leadership under pressure that would either forge legends or create graves. But first, he needed to understand the true scope of Mackenzie's game. Because experienced operators didn't survive by ignoring their instincts, and every instinct Marcus possessed was screaming that this encounter was far more complex than anyone had revealed. The Spetsnaz helicopters touched down in a whirlwind of rotor wash and tactical precision. Colonel Viktor Petrov emerged from the lead aircraft with the fluid grace of a predator. At 48, the Soviet Special Forces commander carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had killed on 3 continents. His pale eyes swept the mountainous terrain as his 20 operators deployed in textbook formation. Marcus watched through binoculars from his concealed position. Iron trained us to study our enemies. What do you see, Harrison? Derek Harrison lay prone beside him, studying the Soviet deployment through his own optics. Petrov's no amateur. He's positioning teams to cut off every escape route before moving on the bunker. Classic Soviet doctrine, Marcus observed. Overwhelming force, systematic elimination of options. He keyed his radio. Hawk, what's your count? From his sniper position, Rick Johnson's voice came back calm and professional. 20 operators confirmed, moving in 4-man teams, command element hanging back with dedicated communications. Doc, defensive positions established, medical supplies secured. Ready for contact. Tom Williams had learned field medicine from Mackenzie, but the old colonel had also taught him that sometimes the most merciful thing a medic could do was ensure clean kills rather than prolonged suffering. Hold position until we know their game plan. Below, Petrov raised his hand and spoke into his radio in rapid Russian. The 4 teams began advancing upslope toward the bunker complex with disciplined coordination. They moved like wolves, patient, methodical, utterly lethal. Bulldog, ammunition count. Jake Rodriguez's voice carried his characteristic dark humor. Enough to make this interesting, boss. Soviet weapon cache has RPG-7s, sufficient AK ammunition, and what appears to be experimental night vision equipment. Marcus calculated odds with Mackenzie's relentless logic. 5 Americans against 20 Spetsnaz in defensive terrain. Ammunition limited. No extraction possible until the threat was neutralized. The kind of tactical nightmare that separated elite operators from dead heroes. Harrison, you said Petrov's been tracking you. What does he know? Everything the Soviets think they know about our operation. He believes I'm a genuine defector with authentic nuclear facility intelligence. Harrison's voice carried grim satisfaction. He also believes you're here to eliminate me before I can complete my sail to Moscow. Can we use that assumption? Possibly. Petrov's mission is recovery and elimination. If he thinks you're hunting me, he might expect us to fight each other first. Marcus considered the deception possibilities. Mackenzie had always taught that enemy assumptions could become weapons if properly exploited. What if we give him exactly what he expects to see? From their position, they watched Soviet teams establish overwatch positions while maintaining constant radio contact. Professional, coordinated, deadly. Petrov was executing a textbook operation with no apparent weaknesses. Then Marcus noticed something that triggered his tactical instincts. Hawk, observe their communications setup. Affirmative. Extensive radio traffic? But they're not using standard encryption protocols. Meaning, either they're overconfident or they want someone to monitor their communications. Marcus felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. Harrison, how long have the Soviets been tracking your operation? 3 months minimum. Maybe longer. And Mackenzie knew about their surveillance? Harrison hesitated. Yes. He said it was necessary for operational security. Marcus's understanding shifted like tectonic plates. He wanted them to track you. This entire encounter was orchestrated. Before Harrison could respond, Marcus began outlining his realization to the team. Mackenzie hadn't just created a double-agent operation. He had engineered a triple deception. The Soviets thought they were recovering stolen intelligence. Harrison thought he was feeding them false information. But Marcus was beginning to understand that the real objective was something else entirely. Doc, how's your Russian? Functional. Mackenzie insisted on language training for prisoner interrogation. Perfect. Here's what we're going to do. 20 minutes later, Derek Harrison stumbled into the open ground between the Soviet positions and the bunker complex. His hands were zip-tied behind his back, and he moved with the awkward gait of a man being driven forward at gunpoint. Marcus followed 10 meters behind, weapon trained on Harrison's back, playing the role of captor pursuing a traitor. Petrov's voice boomed across the valley in accented English. American captain, you will surrender the prisoner and withdraw from this area immediately. Marcus shouted back, his voice carrying perfectly calculated anger. This traitor sold nuclear secrets to your people. He dies here. The prisoner has intelligence valuable to Soviet interests. He will be taken alive. Over my dead body. The standoff continued for several minutes, with both sides maintaining positions while exchanging increasingly hostile demands. To the Soviets, it appeared exactly as intelligence had predicted. American forces attempting to eliminate a defector before he could complete his mission. Then Doc Williams opened fire from concealment. The shot took down a Soviet flanking team member with professional precision. Immediately, Marcus dove for cover, while Harrison rolled behind a boulder, creating the illusion that the Americans were split between competing objectives. Petrov's response was swift and decisive. All teams engage American positions. Prisoner recovery is secondary priority until threat is neutralized. The mountain erupted in gunfire as Soviet teams engaged what they believed were scattered American forces. Marcus used the chaos to reposition, calling tactical updates to his team while maintaining the deception that they were fighting independently rather than as a coordinated unit. Bulldog, light them up from the cache position. Rodriguez opened fire with a captured Soviet machine gun, sending tracers across the valley while shouting curses in Spanish that carried clearly to enemy positions. The psychological effect was immediate. Petrov's teams began focusing on the apparent American strongpoint while missing the careful repositioning of other elements. Hawk's sniper rifle spoke twice, dropping Soviet operators who had moved into exposed positions. Doc Williams continued his selective targeting, creating the impression of multiple American teams operating independently rather than a coordinated defense. After 30 minutes of intense firefight, Marcus made his move. Using terrain features Mackenzie had taught him to recognize, he worked his way to within 50 meters of Petrov's command position. The Soviet commander was exactly where Marcus expected, maintaining visual control while coordinating his teams via radio. Professional, predictable, and completely focused on managing a complex tactical situation. Marcus keyed his radio to an open frequency he knew the Soviets were monitoring. "This is Captain Marcus Steele, United States Army. I'm prepared to negotiate prisoner exchange." Petrov's response came immediately. "Explain your terms, Captain. I have information about additional CIA operations in this region. Intelligence your superiors would find valuable." A long pause. Marcus could practically hear Petrov calculating possibilities. A field commander who could deliver both the rogue agent and intelligence about broader American operations would earn significant recognition in Moscow. "Approach under flag of truce. You will come alone." Marcus emerged from cover with his weapon lowered, but ready. As he walked toward Petrov's position, he reflected on Mackenzie's core teaching. The most dangerous moment in any operation is when the enemy believes they're winning. Petrov was a professional soldier with decades of experience, but he was also a Soviet officer trained to recognize opportunities for intelligence gathering. The prospect of capturing both Harrison and obtaining broader operational intelligence represented exactly the kind of success that would define a career. He was also standing exactly where Marcus needed him to be for the final phase of the plan. "Captain Steele." Petrov's English was precise, formal. "You understand that cooperation will be beneficial for all parties." "I understand that my men are outnumbered and outgunned," Marcus replied. "I also understand that you're a professional soldier who recognizes tactical realities." "Indeed. Your position is untenable." Marcus nodded thoughtfully, then smiled with cold satisfaction. "Which is why I changed the game." The confusion in Petrov's eyes lasted exactly 1 second before Harrison's voice came over the radio frequency both commanders were monitoring. "Falcon Base. This is Raven. Soviet command element is marked for immediate artillery strike. Coordinates confirmed. Fire mission approved." Petrov's expression shifted from confusion to understanding to horror as the distant rumble of incoming artillery filled the mountain air. The rounds Marcus had called in 20 minutes earlier, using Harrison's CIA communication equipment, were finally arriving on target. "You see, Colonel," Marcus continued conversationally, "my mentor taught me that when facing impossible odds, you don't try to beat them. You change the game entirely." The first artillery rounds impacted 100 meters away, well clear of American positions but close enough to demonstrate deadly serious intent. Petrov's teams immediately began calling for extraction while taking defensive positions. Your helicopters are damaged, Marcus continued, noting the shrapnel impacts on the Soviet aircraft. Your extraction route is compromised. Your mission parameters just changed from offensive to survival. Petrov studied Marcus with professional respect. What are you proposing, Captain? Safe passage for your surviving men in exchange for tactical withdrawal. No prisoners taken, no intelligence gathered, but everyone goes home alive to fight another day. The Soviet commander considered options that had suddenly become very limited. His mission was compromised, his forces were taking casualties, and American artillery had transformed the tactical situation completely. Acceptable terms, Petrov said finally. But I will remember this encounter, Captain Steele. I'm counting on it, Colonel Petrov. As the Soviet forces began their tactical withdrawal under cover of smoke grenades, Marcus gathered his team for extraction. The mission had succeeded beyond original parameters. Harrison's cover was maintained, Soviet intelligence gathering was prevented, and American casualties were minimal. But as they prepared to leave the mountains, Marcus realized that Mackenzie's true lesson wasn't about tactics or strategy. It was about understanding that in the world of intelligence operations, every victory was temporary, every ally was potentially an enemy, and every mission contained layers that might not be revealed for years. The hardest part wasn't defeating the enemy. It was living with the knowledge that the game never truly ended. 6 hours later, the extraction helicopters should have arrived by now. Marcus checked his watch for the fourth time in 10 minutes, his concern growing with each passing moment. Intelligence had confirmed Soviet withdrawal, but radio contact with Iron Base had been sporadic since the artillery strike. More troubling was the intelligence update that had arrived 30 minutes ago via encrypted burst transmission. New Soviet forces were moving toward their position, not Petrov's damaged unit, but fresh operators with a very different mission profile. Ghost, this is Iron Base. Extraction delayed indefinitely. Mackenzie's voice carried a tension Marcus had never heard before. Something was catastrophically wrong. Explain. Iron Base? Soviet forces have regrouped at grid reference 3934887. Intelligence suggests Colonel Dmitry Kozlov has assumed operational command. His mission parameters are different from Petrov's. Harrison looked up from checking his equipment, his face pale. Kozlov? That's impossible. He's supposed to be in Prague. Moscow pulled him from Prague specifically for this operation. Mackenzie's voice crackled through static. His orders are simple. Complete elimination of all American personnel involved in this operation. No survivors, no intelligence recovery. He's been authorized to erase any evidence that this mission ever occurred. Marcus felt ice in his stomach. Kozlov was a name whispered in intelligence briefings, a man who specialized in sanitizing operations that had gone wrong. If Moscow had escalated to Kozlov's involvement, someone at the highest levels had decided that the risks of this operation outweighed any potential benefits. Iron Base, what changed? Why the escalation? Mackenzie's pause lasted too long. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of terrible knowledge. Ghost, I need you to listen carefully. There's something about this operation that even Harrison doesn't know. Marcus keyed his radio. Explain. The nuclear facility intelligence Harrison carried isn't just false information designed to mislead the Soviets. It contains real vulnerabilities in our defense systems. Information so sensitive that its existence is known only to 12 people in the United States government. Harrison stood up sharply. Colonel, that's impossible. I was briefed on every aspect of my operational materials. You were briefed on what you needed to know to maintain operational security, Mackenzie continued. But the real intelligence was embedded in the false documents using steganographic techniques. If Soviet intelligence ever subjected those files to deep analysis, they would discover our actual nuclear vulnerabilities. Marcus felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders like lead. Are you telling us that Harrison has been carrying real nuclear secrets this entire time? Affirmative. And if Kozlov succeeds in eliminating this team and recovering the materials, Moscow will possess intelligence that could cripple our nuclear deterrent capability within months. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about maintaining Harrison's cover anymore. This was about preventing Soviet access to intelligence that could shift the entire balance of the Cold War. What are our options, Iron Base? Limited. You need to destroy the intelligence materials before Kozlov arrives. But the destruction requires a specific chemical process that takes 15 minutes minimum, and Kozlov has 40 operators, helicopter gunship support, and authorization to use any means necessary. Marcus looked at his team. 4 exhausted operators with limited ammunition, facing impossible odds in hostile territory. The kind of situation Mackenzie had trained them for, but hoped they would never face. How long until Kozlov arrives? Best estimate 40 minutes. His forces are moving fast, but they're being careful to avoid the artillery zones you established earlier. 40 minutes to destroy intelligence materials that could prevent nuclear war, while defending against 40 elite Soviet operators with air support. Marcus began calculating tactical options with Mackenzie's merciless mathematics. Iron Base, we need immediate extraction. Any available assets. Negative, Ghost. All extraction routes are compromised. Kozlov has positioned air defenses to cover the entire valley. But there is one option. Marcus waited, knowing that Mackenzie's options usually involved accepting casualties that conventional commanders would consider unacceptable. There's a relay station on the mountain peak, approximately 2 kilometers from your current position. If you can reach it and establish communications, you can upload the real nuclear intelligence to our satellites. Once we have that data, the materials Harrison carries become worthless. Marcus studied the terrain through his binoculars. The peak was visible, but reaching it would require movement through open ground that Soviet forces could easily observe and target. Time frame for transmission? 15 minutes minimum for complete data transfer. You'll need to maintain position and defend the transmission site against whatever Kozlov throws at you. 15 minutes. Against 40 Spetsnaz operators with air support, in an exposed position with no cover and limited ammunition. Mackenzie was asking them to accomplish the impossible. Iron Base, be advised, I know what I'm asking, son. Mackenzie's voice carried absolute understanding. I know exactly what I'm asking. Marcus gathered his team for final mission planning. Each man understood the tactical realities without detailed explanation. They were being asked to hold impossible ground against overwhelming odds, trading their lives for intelligence that could prevent nuclear war. Doc, medical supplies? Enough for immediate trauma care, nothing for extended engagement. Hawk, ammunition? 40 rounds for the sniper rifle. Maybe 200 for secondary weapons. Bulldog? Soviet weapons cache is mostly depleted. Enough for initial contact, maybe 10 minutes of sustained fire. Marcus nodded, calculating their chances with Mackenzie's mathematics. Against professional soldiers in superior numbers with air support, their survival probability was essentially 0. But survival wasn't the mission parameter. Success was. Harrison, can you handle the transmission equipment? Affirmative, but it requires stable platform for 15 minutes minimum. Any significant movement or vibration will interrupt the satellite link, which meant someone would need to remain completely stationary at the transmission site while defending against determined assault by elite operators. The tactical impossibility of the situation was almost mathematical in its precision. Listen up, Marcus addressed his team with the same calm authority Mackenzie had always demonstrated. We're not trying to win this fight. We're trying to complete the mission. Doc, you'll establish defensive positions along the primary approach route. Hawk, overwatch from secondary ridge. Bulldog, mobile response to wherever they hit us hardest. He turned to Harrison. You'll handle the transmission. I'll stay with you to provide close protection. Doc Williams looked up from checking his medical kit. Sir, what about extraction? Marcus met his eyes steadily. Extraction is not the mission parameter. Mission success is the priority. The words hung in the mountain air like smoke from distant artillery. Each man understood what Marcus was telling them, without euphemism or false hope. They were being asked to die for their country in the most literal sense possible. They moved through the darkness with practiced silence, each step deliberate and economical. Soviet forces were repositioning for assault, but Marcus's team had the temporary advantage of movement while their enemies established static positions. The transmission site was exactly as intelligence had described, a rocky outcrop with clear line of sight to satellite positioning, but completely exposed to ground assault from multiple directions. Harrison immediately began setting up the communication equipment while Marcus studied approach routes with tactical eyes trained by 30 years of Mackenzie's instruction. Iron Base, Ghost, we're in position for transmission. Copy, Ghost. Begin data upload on my mark. Be advised, satellite window is only 18 minutes. If you miss this pass, next opportunity is in 6 hours. 6 hours they didn't have. Marcus keyed his radio acknowledgement just as Hawk's voice crackled through the static. Movement on multiple approach routes. Count approximately 30 operators in assault formation. ETA to transmission site approximately 12 minutes. Marcus checked his watch. 18 minutes for satellite transmission, 12 minutes until assault began. They would need to defend the position for at least 6 minutes under direct fire while maintaining stable transmission conditions. Harrison, begin transmission now. Derek Harrison activated the communication array, and immediately the equipment began its steady electronic chatter with satellites orbiting 300 miles above the Hindu Kush Mountains. The sound was barely audible, but to Marcus it represented the difference between nuclear vulnerability and nuclear security. Iron Base, Ghost, transmission in progress. Copy, Ghost. Signal strength is good. Maintain current position. Through his binoculars, Marcus could see Soviet forces moving into assault positions with textbook precision. Kozlov was taking no chances. His 30 operators were positioning for coordinated assault from 3 directions simultaneously, ensuring that no defensive position could cover all approach routes. Professional, methodical, absolutely lethal. Hawk, priority targets? Marking command elements. Eliminating leadership might slow their coordination. Take your shots when ready. Hawk's sniper rifle spoke 3 times in rapid succession, each shot precisely placed to maximize tactical disruption. Soviet advance teams immediately took cover while calling for supporting fire. The mountain erupted in automatic weapons fire as Kozlov's forces began their assault. Doc Williams opened fire from his defensive position, forcing Soviet teams to advance under cover rather than rushing the transmission site. Bulldog Rodriguez moved between positions, using captured Soviet weapons to create the impression of multiple defenders. But Marcus could see the mathematics of the situation developing exactly as Mackenzie would have calculated. Superior numbers, coordinated assault, unlimited ammunition against exhausted defenders with limited resources. They had perhaps 5 minutes before Soviet forces reached the transmission site. Iron Base, sitrep on transmission progress. 60% complete. Maintain position for 8 more minutes. 8 minutes. Marcus smiled grimly, remembering Mackenzie's lesson about impossible odds. When you can't win the game, you change the rules entirely. All stations, Ghost, implement Protocol 7. Protocol 7 was Mackenzie's final tactical option. Simultaneous assault on enemy positions from defensive locations, sacrificing defensive advantages for offensive initiative. The last desperate gamble when conventional tactics offered no path to success. Doc Williams abandoned his defensive position and charged directly towards Soviet assault teams, medical training forgotten in favor of assault techniques Mackenzie had drilled into every operator. Hawk left his overwatch position to engage targets at close range with secondary weapons. Bulldog Rodriguez advanced on Soviet positions with captured machine guns, creating maximum disruption through aggressive action. The tactical insanity of the maneuver was also its effectiveness. Kozlov's forces had positioned for coordinated assault against static defenders. Suddenly facing attacking Americans disrupted their coordination and forced individual responses rather than unit tactics. Marcus remained with Harrison at the transmission site, providing close protection while his team bought precious minutes with aggressive action that bordered on suicide. Transmission 75% complete, Harrison reported. 5 more minutes. Through the chaos of gunfire and explosions, Marcus could hear his team's weapons falling silent one by one. Doc Williams first, his distinctive M16 going quiet after a burst of enemy fire. Then Bulldog Rodriguez, his captured Soviet machine gun ceasing its steady chatter. Finally, Hawk Johnson's sniper rifle, silenced by what sounded like a grenade explosion. Each silence represented another good man giving his life for mission success. Transmission 90% complete. 2 minutes. Soviet forces were advancing on the transmission site now, slowed but not stopped by the sacrifice of Marcus's team. Kozlov himself appeared among the assault teams, directing final positioning for the attack that would end American resistance. Marcus prepared for the last minutes of his life, thinking not of failure or death, but of Mackenzie's voice during their first training session 30 years ago. Son, being a soldier isn't about dying for your country. It's about making sure your death means something. Transmission complete, Harrison announced. All intelligence data successfully uploaded. Marcus keyed his radio for the final time. Iron Base, Ghost, mission accomplished. Tell Iron his boys did good. Mackenzie's voice came back immediately, carrying pride and grief in equal measure. Copy, Ghost. Message understood. Well done, son. Well done. Soviet assault teams were within 50 meters now, close enough for Marcus to see individual faces. Professional soldiers doing their duty just as he was doing his. He raised his weapon for the final engagement, then heard Harrison's voice behind him. Marcus, there's one more thing Mackenzie never told you. Marcus kept his weapon trained on the approaching Soviets. What? The relay station has a self-destruct mechanism. Chemical charges designed to destroy sensitive equipment. The explosion will level this entire mountain peak. Marcus understood immediately. Mackenzie's final lesson, even in death, protect the mission and your men. The self-destruct would eliminate the evidence of American presence and prevent Soviet intelligence gathering from the aftermath. How long? 30 seconds after activation. Marcus smiled, thinking of Mackenzie's teaching about sacrifice with purpose. Do it. Harrison activated the mechanism as Soviet forces began their final assault. Marcus continued firing, holding them back for the crucial seconds needed to ensure complete mission success. The explosion, when it came, was visible from orbit. Arlington Cemetery, present day. Marcus returned to the present as the honor guard completed their ceremony. Mackenzie's coffin was lowered into the earth with military precision, joining the countless other warriors who had served their country with honor. A young captain approached as the ceremony concluded. Sir, Colonel Mackenzie left instructions for you to receive this. The envelope contained a single sheet of paper with Mackenzie's distinctive handwriting. Marcus, you survived because Harrison triggered the self-destruct 2 seconds late, allowing the mountain's cave system to protect you from the blast. Doc, Bulldog, and Hawk also survived in the caves, recovered by extraction teams 12 hours later. Your sacrifice saved 2.3 million American lives. Well done, son. The watch continues. Marcus folded the letter carefully, remembering now the darkness of the caves, the pain of his injuries, and the long recovery that followed. The official reports had classified the entire operation, but the results spoke for themselves. Soviet nuclear capabilities had been neutralized. The Cold War had shifted toward diplomatic resolution, and America's cities remained safe. A young sergeant approached hesitantly. Sir, excuse me, sir? Marcus turned to see a soldier barely old enough to vote, wearing the distinctive insignia of Army Special Operations Command. Sir, I'm Sergeant Williams. I start training at Fort Bragg next week. Colonel Mackenzie recommended I speak with you about what it means to serve. Marcus studied the young man's face, seeing the same combination of determination and uncertainty he had carried 37 years ago. The same qualities Mackenzie had recognized and shaped into something greater than the sum of its parts. Walk with me, Sergeant, Marcus said, moving away from the gravesite toward the cemetery's main path. Let me tell you about honor and sacrifice, and what it really means to serve your country. As they walked together through Arlington's quiet paths, Marcus began teaching the lessons Mackenzie had taught him. The circle continued, as it always had, as it always would. Young warriors learning from old ones, carrying forward traditions forged in combat and tempered by sacrifice. The watch continued. Epilogue. Colonel Viktor Petrov completed his mission in Afghanistan and returned to Soviet service with distinction. Following the collapse of the USSR, he emigrated to Canada, and became a respected professor of military history, where his students know him as a demanding instructor who understands the true cost of conflict. Derek Harrison completed his CIA career and retired with full honors. The nuclear intelligence operation he participated in remained classified for 30 years, but its success fundamentally altered the balance of the Cold War. He never spoke publicly about Operation Ghost Protocol. Captain Marcus Steele served another 15 years before retiring as a colonel. He spent his final decade in uniform training special operations personnel at Fort Bragg, where his students knew him as a demanding instructor who understood that the difference between life and death often came down to lessons learned in peacetime. Doc Williams, Bulldog Rodriguez, and Hawk Johnson all recovered from their wounds and completed distinguished military careers. They remained close friends, gathering annually to remember the mission that changed the course of history while remaining forever classified. Operation Red Dawn was permanently canceled following the intelligence breakthrough achieved by Ghost Team's sacrifice. The planned Soviet nuclear strikes never occurred, and the course of the Cold War shifted toward diplomatic resolution rather than military escalation. Colonel William Iron Mackenzie was posthumously awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom for his role in preventing nuclear conflict. The citation read simply, "For service above and beyond the call of duty, in operations that must remain classified, but whose success preserved the peace and protected American lives." In the end, the most important victories are often the ones that never make headlines, achieved by warriors whose names are carved only on quiet tombstones in Arlington Cemetery. Their watch continues, as it always has, as it always will.